got to understand is that in every industry, in every country, in every continent, there are constant wars going on, brand wars. And having said that, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s in South Africa. At the same time, in the late 70s and early 80s, there was what became known as the Cola Wars. Hands up in the audience if this is your soft drink of choice. Nice. 1, 2. You see, you're in the minority. Not too many people are drinking that. So if that isn't your soft drink of choice, then clearly it is. Yeah, you can shout it out. Coca-Cola, hands up. Oh, okay. Who prefers orange juice? Ugh, gee. Coke and Pepsi, those were the Cola Wars. And in 1983, something really strange happened. Coca-Cola was losing the Cola Wars. Pepsi was becoming more popular than Coca-Cola. And what had happened in the US is they had a research company conduct some research. And they got somebody to dress up in a white coat that made them look like a doctor, made them stand in a supermarket with cups of dark liquid. And the stranger, dressed like a doctor, asked anybody who walked past, he said, "Could you come and taste this and tell me what you like?" And of course, we all do that, don't we? And I don't get it, because my parents, my mother, when I grew up, said, never take food from strangers. But yet, when the stranger looks like a doctor, wears a white coat, stands in the supermarket behind a table and says, "Here, would you like to taste this?" You go, "Yeah, sure." So they did this blind taste test. Cups looking identical. One cup had Pepsi, one cup had Coca-Cola, and they asked the people to come by and taste it and asked them which drink they preferred. Now, what do you think happened? Almost 65% of people said they preferred Pepsi. And what do you think happened in Coca-Cola head office in Atlanta, Georgia, when these research results came out? Flat panic. Because as, who was saying earlier, who put the Procter & Gamble stuff up? Yeah, it was 50-50, I would choose wrong. You saw how small brands increase their slice of bigger brands. And so Pepsi was slowly doing this to the point where the majority of people preferred Pepsi. So Coca-Cola thought, well, what do we do? And so off the back of that research, they went and did some market research. And they asked soda drinkers, why do you prefer Pepsi? And Coca-Cola were told that Pepsi is sweeter, or this is what the respondents in the taste test said. It was sweeter, it didn't burn your throat as it went down, and that's why they preferred it. And so Coca-Cola went back to the drawing board. And in 1983, they launched New Coke. They changed the recipe of Coca-Cola, a recipe at that point that had been 90 years old. They changed the recipe to be more like Pepsi. And in big fan, so by the way, at this point, Pepsi had signed on Michael Jackson as the face of Pepsi, because he was the pop star, he was hip, he was happening, that's what was going on. And Coca-Cola didn't have that. So New Coke launches with other celebrities. And what happened to the sales of New Coke? As it launched, it went straight up to number one. Everybody bought it. And as quickly as it went up to number one, as that fast, it dropped down right off the charts. People hated it. They bought it because they were curious. So what is New Coke? And then they complained and said, but it's too sweet. But wasn't that what you said you liked about Pepsi? Right? And so what happened is that within 6 months, New Coke quietly disappeared, and Coca-Cola brought back the original recipe, and they called it, who can remember? Because anybody know? They called it Coca-Cola Classic, for those who don't like change. And then after another 6 or 8 months of Coca-Cola Classic, that Classic just dropped off, and the original Coca-Cola recipe returned. I mean, think about it. There's nothing better than cheers. There's nothing more refreshing than a Coca-Cola. But what do we learn from this? As brands, as marketing people, what do we learn from this? Well, the first thing we learn is that consumers don't really know what they want. They think they do, but they don't. If Henry Ford had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse that does more miles by the hay bale. They wouldn't have said a car that can drive you anywhere. So people don't know what they want, but they definitely know what they don't want. Bless you. The next thing we learn is that we ignore emotional connections to our peril. So in a blind taste test, when you have Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and you don't know which is which, you're going to make that decision in a very different way than when you see this. When you see the ribbon logo, when you see the name, when you see everything this can stands for. Because it's not about the drink. It's about what the drink represents. It's about the lifestyle. It's about enjoying a Coke. Their early marketing messages was, have a Coke and a smile. In early Coca-Cola advertisements, you never saw somebody on their own enjoying a Coca-Cola. You always saw them with other people, enjoying food, the outdoors, summer, good times. Prior to Coca-Cola becoming popular, did you know that Santa Claus, that mythical figure in the Western world, in Christian religion, that brings the world Christmas presents at the end of every year, and magically he does that, 7 billion presents in under 24 hours. Tesla and SpaceLink isn't even going to get to that. But here's the point. Before Coca-Cola, Santa Claus wore a green suit. And in 1968, Coca-Cola dressed Santa in Coca-Cola red. And what's happened ever since then? Santa Claus now wears red. That is the impact that a brand, that is the impact that a product can have on society, on our lives.